destroying the very equity of our communities itself. As mayor, what will you do to address the foreclosure crisis by hopefully bringing together the banks to get some of these abandoned buildings sort of turned over to community groups and churches?
Well, as I stated earlier, I was just at a gathering this afternoon where we were asked whether or not, as mayoral candidates, we support Alderman Pat Dow's ordinance that would require banks that have possession of 5 or more properties to post a $10,000 bond in order to make sure that they follow through in dealing with those properties, because what is happening now is that some of these banks are basically walking away from these properties and leaving them vacant, and they should be responsible. We should not allow them to leave vacant properties in place in neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood. That requires action on the part of the city council, and it requires tough action. And this ordinance was proposed in July, filed in July. Here we are in January, and when you count up the number of foreclosures that have taken place in the last 7 months, it's a huge, huge number. And so if we get tough with the banks, and we should, because they got the bailouts. They got the bailouts with our money. And so they're able to make big profits now as a result of the federal bailout. And so they have to be forced to the table by the city of Chicago. And we, of course, deposit lots of money in some of these banks, city funds, and they have to be able to work with community organizations and work with other groups to do loan modifications and to help individuals keep their homes and help them get through tough times. That's really the bottom line. We don't want a vacant property. We want home ownership. But right now, you have a city council that has to change. And hopefully in this election, we'll have a lot of new blood in the city council, and you're going to have a mayor who's going to be willing to get tough with financial institutions, because of course the business sector says, well, you're going to drive them out of Chicago. No, you're not going to drive them out of Chicago. Thank you. You're going to make them be responsible.
The foreclosure crisis is so detrimental to all of our communities. And one major issue that we need to look at, and that is that the housing is just upside down. I mean, people owe much more money on their houses than they're worth. That's why I think it's important for programs like Sweet Home Chicago ordinance that requires that a certain percentage of any housing that's developed using any TIF dollars or different any city support, that they provide X amount of housing, affordable housing, in those projects. And I think that's important because we got to turn the thing around. We got to realize we are a long ways down the road. And my staff has been thinking about this. And one of the things we're thinking of doing going forward is establishing a homeowners association, a citywide homeowners association. So the homeowners are not fighting banks by themselves, one at a time. Because everybody goes in there and negotiate one at a time. And if somebody gets something, somebody don't get anything, and everybody gets, not enough. But with the homeowners association, a citywide homeowners association, it can help to overcome many of the challenges that we are faced with right now, because these homeowners wouldn't be fighting alone. So I would definitely, any bank that's doing business with Chicago, I think need to be brought to the table. They have a responsibility. When we moved criminal justice bills in Springfield, sealing records of nonviolent drug felons, and also diverting people out of the system, we brought the Illinois Retail Merchants Association to the table. And we told them Walgreens, McDonald's, Dominick's is all in our neighborhoods. You're feeding off of us, you owe us support. And we ask you to help us move policy. I do the same thing with the banks. If the banks are feeding off of us and benefiting from the city, I think they have a fiduciary responsibility to help us rebuild these communities. And part of that is getting rid of all these blocked up buildings and opening them up for people to be able to use now, right now, in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
I believe we need a new Homestead Act here in the city of Chicago. It makes no sense whatsoever to have vacant buildings that are eyesores and that are becoming dilapidated in our community when we have so many people who are homeless. We displaced 210,000 people when we shut down the Chicago Housing Authority. shut down those projects. Many of those people were given vouchers and forced to move to the suburbs, to Indiana, Iowa, and Wisconsin. With the same voucher that you pay for rent, that could easily be paid on a mortgage. So we want to encourage home ownership, because when people own their own homes or are owning their own home, they're more conscientious, they're more responsible, they're much more part of the community, and at the end of the day, it makes sense. So, a Homestead Act in the city of Chicago, and I also support Sweet Home Chicago, and here's what it actually entails. It entails that 20% of the surplus TIF funds would be used specifically for housing. Housing has to be a priority. Communities are built around parks, schools, and libraries, but if you don't have established housing in communities, it eventually will fail. Yes, we have to deal with those banks. But the way to deal with them is to compete with them. North Dakota, the state of North Dakota has its own banking system. They have their own banks. It would be nothing for the city of Chicago to establish its own bank, a bank that makes everybody bankable, that doesn't charge people those exorbitant fees when they bounce a check, $37.50, which sends people into turmoil and sends them down that spiral. At the same time, we have to take away their incentive to charge people those ridiculous fees by taxing them and taking that money back from them so that they develop real customer relation and understanding for people who are in need.
Thank you. Thank you.